Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sparta Baptist. It's great to have you. If you are here, we believe that you have come to the right place. We want you to feel safe here, safe to bring anything here, your anxiety, depression, struggles, unresolved issues. You have come to the right place. However, we would also say you may not be fully comfortable here because we believe that the Jesus who loves all of us as is loves us too much to leave us there. God is always moving. He's always inviting, as we're going to hear from Dan in a little bit. He's inviting us into something different, something better. And so just keep that in mind. Safe, not necessarily comfortable. Nate and Carla are in Florida until Tuesday. They're coaching pastors and wives at a Converge conference. I feel so bad for them. Just please pray for just refreshment and then safety as they make their way back. We had a really awesome youth activity here last night. It involved the kids shooting each other, and I'm not going to leave that there. I'm going to let Anthony come up and share a little bit about the archery tag event. Anthony.
Thank you, whoever started that over here. So, like Ben said, we had archery tag last night. We set up some tables in the gym and made some barricades. It was a ton of fun. By far the best part of the night for me was that I got to shoot kids. However, at the end of the evening, I did let everybody go up on the balcony and have free shots at me while I tried to make a free throw. I am not good at basketball. It took me like 6 or 7 attempts. I got a nice little cut on my forehead from it. All that to say, it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. I know the kids did as well. The leaders did. The parents did. And we're doing it again. I'm not sure exactly when. It'll be in April or May. I'll put an exact date out in a few weeks. So come to the next one if you didn't come to this one. But beware, those of us who were here last night, we shot a lot of arrows. And we got really good. And I, for one, am not going to let my skills deteriorate in the meantime. So if you come to the next one, you better be ready, because I'm coming for you. Thank you.
And now, the financial report, Tom Lampin.
I didn't get to shoot anybody, but, I'm not as cool as Anthony, so, but, thank you. Thank you so much. My monthly meet and greet with you. I get to stand up here for a few minutes, and thank you so much for everything you continue to do for this church. In a number of ways, I get to talk about the financial side. I think about a month ago now, or a little less than a month, we celebrated 2022, all the things that went on here and all the great things that happened, and we finished the year in the black. That was fantastic. You just pushed us way across the finish line, had some leftovers. And usually in January, everybody kind of catches their breath. Whew, slows down, the holidays are over, and giving slows a little bit. That's not abnormal for us, but just wanted to make sure that you understand this place doesn't slow down in January compared to December. Well, a little bit maybe, but things are still going on here. Cool things here and globally and that type of thing. So we continue to need your financial help. Our budget is about $28,000 a year. That's the budget you approved last month. Increase of about $9,000, I think a little bit under 3%. You all said, you betcha, we're going to do this. So budget was $28,000. We took in about 22.5. So about $6,000 shy of where we wanted to be for the month. That combined with spending, we had a cushion at the end of December. We're about $3,700 short at the end of January. It's kind of a move from plus to minus, but not abnormal for us coming out of the year end. So don't get alarmed. I'm not alarmed yet, but continue to focus on what you can do to partner with Sparta Baptist Church financially. A number of different types of things. We have cool things going on with our kids ministry. Want we to finish that strong? We've got a carnival coming up in March. We want to make sure we resource our youth ministry very well, so more people can try to shoot Anthony, among other things. Want to continue to meet the needs of our mercy ministries and make sure we've support all of our global partners with all of the things they're doing. So if you are partner with us already on a regular basis, part of your budget, thank you so much. Just, prayerfully consider what you can do maybe in addition to what you're already doing. If you haven't plugged in yet, we just ask that you consider doing so. Lots of great ways to do that. You've heard it before, the black box, EFT, you can see my wife about that, online giving, text to give. Pastor Ben lots of times shows the text to give number up there. It's all very easy, very simple, and every dollar is needed. Every dollar is spent both here and to bring in great speakers like Dan and everything that's going on that this church supports. So thank you so much for everything you're doing for SBC. Thanks, Pastor Ben.
Thanks, Tom. Just want to draw your attention to a couple of opportunities to connect and to get involved. Couples, we have our couples retreat date set. It is April 21st and 22nd at the Shack. There is a sign-up sheet at the Welcome Center. If you are interested, please sign up. If you need partial scholarships to be able to go on that weekend, we would love to help you with that. Those are available. Please see me and we will talk about that. And then our hospitality ministry is looking for more people to, on a rotational basis, greet by the doors here before the service starts and maybe like right into the service a little bit, just to make sure that people that come into this big building know where they're going and they feel like they are wanted here. And they don't get lost. I take it for granted, the fact that I've been here for so long, but it's interesting when people come into our doors, how they really don't know where to go, and that makes sense, right? So we need help. Tina Hendrickson, Katie Shelton, you could see me. I'll point you back to them. There's a sign-up sheet at the Welcome Center. If you're interested on a rotational basis to get involved in our hospitality team, that would be awesome. When you came in, you probably received a bulletin, and it looks like this. Just want to draw your attention to this again, that this side is meant for you to, it's meant to direct you to the website. So keep that in mind. There's a QR code on the front. You can interact with us. You can communicate with us. There's like an e-communication card. That's a good way to communicate with us as staff. We would be happy to get back to you. Just know this, whether you're new with us or not, we would love to hear from you. I'll try to just be up here right after the service is over, between then and our engagement hour, and just if you have any questions, if you want to introduce yourselves to me, that would be awesome. If you don't know where to go after that, we do have an engagement hour from 11 to 11:50. So on this side, there's also an SBC link, a Beyond Sunday part where you can sign up to be part of our midweeks that let you know. It usually comes out on Wednesday, and then there's a reminder on Friday or Saturday, and it lets you know everything that goes on in our church, not just on Sunday morning. And then on this side, you get a chance to follow along with the message. There's fill in the blank, and there's a spot to take notes if that's what you want to do. And with that, let's check out our sermon series video.
What if there was a need for a better story? Would it require us to start again? We look back at our lives and say, if I knew then what I know now, the story would be different. Like great filmmakers, we want to remake, reframe, and reboot our story. We want to alter the ending. But in all of history, there has only been one man who can fulfill the promise of the past, who can break the chains of our mistakes, and using the laws that came before him, he can reframe our past, reboot our present, and alter our future. His name is Jesus.
Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. He loves me, this I know.
Good morning, SBC. If you follow my wife Lisa on Facebook, you'll know that I'm a renowned author and entertainer, Dan Morick. You've also heard the endorsement from Tom Lampin that I'm a pretty great speaker. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to share with you. In particular, I'm excited to be in the Gospel of Matthew this morning. It's my favorite book of the Bible. It's one that I've started teaching from pretty early on, and I love teaching from it. But first, you might be wondering, Dan, why do you have a basket full of stuff with you this morning? Well, that's a great question. Basically, this is my basket, and I carry my stuff around in it. For example, I have a snowsuit in here. I always carry a snowsuit with me. It's, in case the weather takes a turn for the worse, always be prepared. That's just how I was always taught. That's just how I was raised. Just always be prepared. So I like to have a snowsuit with me. Let's see, what else do I have in here? I also have this heavy brick with me. Now, I'm not sure why I carry this around, but I just always have. Always have carried a heavy brick around with me. Even sounds heavy. I also have some tools in here. I have this big old rusty hammer. I have this caulk gun that I borrowed from work a while back. I'll return it on Monday now, but I've had it for a while. I don't really know how to use a caulk gun, and when I do, I usually just make a bigger mess with it. But we'll just put that here. My rusty hammer. We'll keep that with me. Also, I have one of my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Funko Pop figures. It's also autographed by the creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman. I actually met him at a Comic-Con a couple of years back, and he's actually a really cool guy, a fun person to meet. He'll autograph anything you bring him. The first one's free. So what I did was I brought my daughter with me. Yeah. So she was standing in line with me. It's her turn, and she's up there with this. And Kevin Eastman says to her, "Oh, is that your favorite turtle?" She says, "Yeah, sure." And then she pointed out where to sign it up here, and instructions I gave her, because I didn't want it signed on the plastic where you can't really see it. So she's like, "Yeah, sure, just sign it right here." But anyway, long story short, I got my DVD signed too. Yeah. So it's a little immature, but it was fun. It was fun. Oh, well, look at this. I also have a copy of My Gospel is Too Small by Dan Morick. That's a great read. There's a couple left out in the display in the lobby. If you haven't had one yet, they're out there for free. Make sure you grab one. Let's see, some other stuff in here too. I have some bandages in case anyone gets hurt this morning. I also have some granola bars in case anyone needs a snack. There's plenty. Feel free. Just come on up. Bottle of water in case anyone gets thirsty. I'm not going to share this because I'm going to have some. So this is more for me, not really for you. So don't take my water. But like I said, help yourself to the granola bars if you get hungry. Okay, so now that I've unpacked my basket, let's get to the message this morning. We're going to be taking a look starting in Matthew chapter 4, verse 23. We're going to be looking at the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Like Pastor Ben said last week, for this conversation around faith deconstruction, we have to make sure we get that first button on the shirt right. And that first button is Jesus. So this morning, we'll read starting in Matthew chapter 4. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. So prior to giving the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was going around Galilee inviting people to follow him. We, of course, know he invited Peter, James, and John, and Andrew. He came to them while they were fishing. He said, "Follow me," and they began to follow him. But he was also going around the area, healing every disease and sickness among the people. In other parts of the gospel, it kind of paints a picture for us of what this looked like as Jesus was going out among the crowds of people. He would go through the crowds, and he would reach out, he would touch them. Remember, he touched the blind man's eyes. He reached out and he touched the lepers. He allowed the sick woman to grab a hold of the corner of his robe, and he noticed her. Even in the crowds, he noticed this woman and her unique concerns and her unique circumstances. Jesus, as he was going through these crowds, and that word, it means thousands of people, just thousands and thousands of people. As he went through these crowds, he noticed individuals, and he was concerned from them. He went about listening to people, eating with them, weeping with them, inviting their children to come close. Jesus responded to people. When they asked him to stay, he stayed. When they asked him to leave, he obliged. There's something so wonderful, so appealing about Jesus that large crowds, thousands of people, followed him. As musician Leonard Cohen said about Jesus, he said, "He may be the most beautiful guy who ever walked the face of the earth. Any guy who says, 'Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek,' has got to be a figure of unparalleled generosity, a generosity that would overthrow the world if it was embraced, because nothing could weather that compassion." There's just something so appealing about Jesus. It was so appealing about this combination of the person and the work of Jesus, who he was and what he did. And that allowed the followers of Jesus to respond to his teaching as an invitation into something better rather than an imposition. Because Jesus spoke with authority. That's how the Sermon on the Mount ends. The people were amazed at the authority that Jesus spoke with, because his words match his actions, not like the Pharisees, who were hypocrites. Jesus' teachings made sense because his person and his work, it all went together. It all made sense. So now for us this morning, the Sermon on the Mount is a very, very familiar section of Scripture. The Beatitudes, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. We've heard that before. We've heard about the salt and the light. We've heard the Lord's Prayer. We've heard the wise and the foolish builders. If you've even spent a small amount of time in church, you've likely heard a reference to the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, some of us, myself included, have been sitting with this text for decades, which is perfect, because you're actually the target audience. Check out Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. It's the first fill in the blank on your bulletin. If I'm a follower of Jesus, I am the target audience. That's important to realize, because the Sermon on the Mount is not an evangelistic sermon. It's for those who responded to Jesus' invitation to follow him, for his disciples. It's for me, it's for you, not someone who isn't here this morning. So don't be taking notes for someone who's not here this morning. It's for us. Now, the Sermon on the Mount contains many of Jesus' core teachings. And Jesus' core teachings are important to this conversation about faith deconstruction that we've been having, because as we study the person and the work of Jesus Christ, any areas of faith that have been deconstructed, like Pastor Nate said, have the potential to be regenerated instead of being demolished. The person, work, and teachings of Jesus, it gives us something to build upon once we've stripped away all of the outdated, underdeveloped, uninformed, and immature aspects of faith. Because some areas of our faith are exactly that. Some areas of our faith are outdated, and we're just grasping at the past, and we need to let them go. That's the good side of the deconstruction conversation. But we also need a direction to rebuild in, to rebuild towards, to get us going in the right direction. So there's areas of our faith that are undeveloped. We say things like, that's just how I was always taught, or I've always just believed that. And we've never done the hard work of making that aspect of our faith personal. So it's an inherited faith, not our own, and it does genuinely need to be examined. There are areas of our faith that are uninformed, like just, I've never heard that before. I didn't know. We might say something like, I'm ignorant. And ignorance is fine. It just means you didn't know, and you now have an opportunity to learn. There are some beliefs and practices and ideas that we've been taught that are actually doing more harm than good. And that was the case with the Pharisees. And Jesus pointed out to the Pharisees that they were actually making God inaccessible because of their beliefs and practices. But we don't realize that until we take a look back at the results of our faith and practices and we see the damage. And then it's like, wow, I didn't know. I didn't realize. And now we can learn from our mistakes and hopefully not repeat them, right? There are some views and ideas that we've been taught to hold with a tight fist, but really they should be held with an open hand. And rather than imposing our views, we should be inviting discussion and conversation. Someone a few weeks back in the engagement hour, she said that she realized that the basket that she was holding the things in, the basket that she held, that what she thought were the most important, most critical, most precious, non-negotiable things that need to be held in that basket at all costs, well, she realized that as she matured in her faith, that the basket was getting smaller. Maybe we don't need to hold on to as many things as we think. Maybe the basket we're carrying our stuff around in needs to be smaller. Maybe I don't need that heavy old brick that I've always been carrying around with me. Maybe I don't need this big old rusty hammer. Maybe I can put the snowsuit away for the season. Now, there's nothing wrong with the snowsuit. It's a really nice snowsuit. It's just out of place in the summer. Of course, there's areas of our faith that are immature. I love the Santa Claus quote a few weeks back that we've matured in our belief about Santa Claus, but we haven't matured in our belief about God. Sometimes we still have a Santa Claus perspective on God. If we're nice, we get blessed. If we're naughty, we suffer. That's immature. That's inaccurate. And that's unhelpful. Maybe it's even harmful. So it's okay to strip out some of that, to really examine some aspects of our faith, maybe even to let them go, to empty the basket. Maybe even deconstruct some of that. The Apostle Paul would say, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. So maybe some of that can be let go. Maybe we can put some of that behind us. But we also have to take care to do the work of rebuilding and using the foundation and the framework of the person and the work and the teachings of Jesus Christ. Because like some of this stuff has to end up back in the basket. But it's not all going to fit in the new basket, right? It's not all going to fit in the smaller basket of the things that we really need to hold on to. But we're not just tearing down the house here. We need to think ahead. We need to think of the rebuilding and the restoration as well. Otherwise, we're just going to end up homeless. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount that a wise person builds their house in the right place. Right? You've heard that before. You've heard that, the wise and the foolish builders. But the wise person rebuilds his house in the right place. He puts the right things back in the smaller basket. Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." The Sermon on the Mount is found in Matthew chapters 5 through 7. In a lot of ways, is the original reboot. In a lot of ways, it is a faith deconstruction. This is what Jesus is going to do in the Sermon on the Mount. He's going to systematically go through the law and the prophets, and he's going to state what the people have been taught. In some cases, what's been imposed on them. And then he's going to invite them into a better way of thinking about those areas of faith. Jesus, throughout the Sermon on the Mount, he's going to say over and over again, you have heard it said to the people long ago, but I tell you. He states the belief that the people inherited. For example, you shall not murder. Everyone's heard that. It's in the Ten Commandments. The Jewish people that were listening to him have heard that before. And we would say, yeah, that's the way I was taught. I've always believed that. I was raised that way. We've always done things like that. And Jesus says, I know. That's why I'm saying you've heard it long ago. You've heard this your whole life. We've heard certain teachings our whole life. I've always carried that brick in my basket. I've had this brick my whole life. I've always carried it around with me. Remember, we're the target audience. So Jesus knows that we've heard this stuff our whole lives. But Jesus, rather than throwing out the commandment, he's going to offer a more full and complete picture. That's what verse 17 is saying. He isn't abolishing the law or the prophets. He isn't throwing out everything. He's just going to give us a more complete understanding of it. And that's why the target audience is so important to recognize, because, like I said, this isn't an evangelistic sermon. It's not an evangelistic sermon designed to expose sin at an even deeper level. You may have heard something like, if you're even angry, or if you even look with lust. And it's not imposing heavier burdens on believers like the Pharisees were known for. You know, the Pharisees were known for saying, you're praying wrong, you're giving wrong, you're judging wrong. These are all things Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount. But that's Jesus isn't imposing these things on. We've heard stuff like, you're supposed to be salt and light, and if you're not salty, then you're not bright enough. These kind of imposing, sort of heavier burdens. That's not what this sermon is about. How many of us have heard the sermon used as evangelism pressure or a guilt trip for struggling believers? But that misses the target audience. The audience was people who responded to Jesus, who responded to his person and his work, and were eager to respond to his teachings. They wanted something better. They recognized the authority and saw the sharp distinction between him and who he was and what they were used to as represented by the Pharisees. There was something different and something appealing that caught their interest. They were captivated by the person of Jesus. That's the second fill in the blank. If we become captivated by the person of Jesus, we will learn to trust his invitation into something better. So let's take a look at the first one in chapter 5, verse 21. Jesus says, you heard it said to the people long ago. Jesus says, okay, you were raised this way, you were taught this your whole life. I've always worn this snowsuit. You've heard this said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be in subject to judgment. Now that's fair enough. That's a good commandment. That's an agreeable commandment. I know there's days where I'm glad Jesus didn't throw out this commandment, because I'm sure, for example, the vibe at work would be a lot different, right? If Jesus had just tossed this command out. But really, just restricting isn't really striking at the core issue here. Jesus continues. He says, but I tell you, you've heard this said, but I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or a sister will be subject to judgment. Anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. Anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. So Jesus here points out that anger never really ends in a good place, that it has this tendency to escalate, that it escalates from Raka to you fool. That's an escalation in the intensity of the anger. And you notice the escalation in the severity of the penalty, from subject to judgment, like getting a ticket or a fine, to being in danger of the fire of hell. So we see that escalation. That's what Jesus is pointing out, this escalation from just being annoyed to really flipping out on someone. Then Jesus goes on, he points out that our anger can impact our worship priorities. He says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, if you're at church, and when you're at church, you remember that brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar, and first, go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. So here's what Jesus is inviting us into something better. Instead of anger being our default and our go-to option for dealing with conflict, Jesus says in verse 24, first go and be reconciled. Jesus invites us into a better way of dealing with conflict. Rather than escalation before choosing anger as our only option, we can choose first to go and be reconciled. Well, I had no other option. Well, Jesus would actually later, he would demonstrate that there are other options. When he was being crucified, he said, Father, forgive them. He chose reconciliation. He chose the cross. See, his life demonstrates to us that there is a better way to respond. And he invites us into that. He invites us to choose forgiveness, to choose reconciliation rather than escalation. Escalation, which leads to anger, which leads to broken friendships, damaged relationships, separated families, hurt communities. And this brokenness, it leads to a separation, slammed doors, walking out on each other, never speaking to them again. That's what the Bible calls death, separation, which is the result of murder. That's why Jesus says, verse 25, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together, as opposed to separated. Do it while you're still together on the way. Settle matters quickly while you're still together, before there's a separation, before there's a murder. Jesus invites his disciples to consider reconciliation and forgiveness as opposed to anger, and he demonstrated to us what that looked like. Jesus would say, follow me. We can trust him because his person and his work and his teachings all match. And he invites us in that. He shows us how to do it, and then he's with us while we figure it out because he knows it's not easy. So Jesus continues in verse 27. I have my hammer for this one. He says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Verse 31, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you, anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So I've carried this rusty hammer around for years. And sure, I've pounded a few things with it. But usually, it's the wrong tool for basic home maintenance. Like, it's kind of hard to, finesse a picture frame nail into the wall with one of these bad boys. It's not exactly a delicate tool. And oftentimes, the wrong tool can cause more harm than good. See, these verses are often taught through a lens of shame and guilt and are used like a rusty hammer to beat people down. And it's the wrong tool. Here's the thing. We're probably all guilty here. We're probably all ashamed of the things we've done in the past, our thought life, the way we've handled purity and sexuality and intimate relationships, whether our personal purity or what we try to impose on someone else. Adultery in our hearts, unfaithfulness, double standards, shame, what we consider acceptable or normal behavior. But what tool would Jesus use here? What tool in my basket would Jesus use here? The rusty hammer to bludgeon us with guilt? The snowsuit to cover it up so we don't have to think about it? Would he use, where did I put it? Would he use the caulk gun to make a bigger mess? Right? Because nobody really knows how to use one of these, right? I mean, come on. Maybe somebody does. But it usually just makes a bigger mess. Is that what Jesus would use? Just to make a bigger mess? Bigger mess, say something like boys would be boys, or she should have dressed different? Is that the kind of tool Jesus would have used? What is Jesus inviting us to in here? Well, the word that stood out to me most in this section wasn't adultery, even though it's repeated. The word that stood out to me most when I read through it this time was victim. When he said, makes her a victim of adultery. Makes her a victim, imposes victimization. Many of us, in some way, shape, or form, have been victimized by adultery or have victimized others with adultery. I think this morning, instead of imposing more and more unattainable purity standards, Jesus is inviting us to be more sensitive to the damage that this type of sin causes. To handle our male to female relationships in a way that doesn't victimize each other. To guard our thoughts. To deal drastically with those areas of concern in regards to our sexuality. Look at verse 30. If your eye or your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. This is serious stuff. This is talking about dealing seriously with choices, with actions, with attitudes, with thoughts, behaviors that cause us to stumble, that ultimately cause us to victimize one another. So what tool in my basket would Jesus use? Well, you don't use a rusty hammer on victims. There has never been a paramedic who showed up with a rusty hammer to help somebody out after, it just doesn't help. It causes more damage. How about the bandages? See, victims need their wounds bound up, not exposed, not covered up. I'm not suggesting a we don't talk about it kind of cover-up culture, but certainly victims shouldn't be wounded again. See, Jesus was a healer. Some of his most sensitive moments in his interactions with people were with victims of adultery. Think of the woman caught in the act. You think the woman at the well. These are Jesus' followers. A lot of Jesus' followers are victims of adultery. We're invited to be more sensitive, closer to the person of Jesus. Closer to the person of Jesus that we saw moving through the crowd, reaching out to people, healing their wounds, touching their hurts, not hiding from the hurt and the pain, not hiding from the victims, but sitting with them, hearing their stories, weeping with them, letting them grab a hold of Jesus' garment, inviting them to follow him into something better. Can we cut off the selfishness and the greed and the self-gratification, the self-seeking behavior and attitudes and thoughts that create victims of adultery? And can we be sensitive to the damage that's been caused? And can we respond to it in a healing way, using the right tools, rather than a hurtful way, with the way we've always been taught? Can we be more sensitive to the victims of adultery? I think that's part of what Jesus means when he says, follow me, right? And then he went around healing everyone he came into contact, acting as salt and light, right? We've heard that before in the Sermon on the Mount, salt and light to purify the wounds, to guide people into safety, not to sting people and blind people and do more damage, but to protect and to guide and to invite into something better. Jesus continues in verse 33. He says, again, you've heard it said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill your oath to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. All you need to say is simply yes or no. One of the things Pastor Nate has taught us over and over again in the Men's Rise is that our path is greater than our promise. It doesn't matter what we promise to do or what we swear to God. Like, I swear to God, I'll do it next time. I promise I'll be home on time. I promise I'll be a better husband. I'll quit, I promise, just after one more. See, but our path is better than our promise. And here, Jesus isn't trying to corner us into making promises to God to be better. He's inviting us to live an uncomplicated life. That's the next fill in the blank. Jesus isn't trying to corner us into making promises to God to be better. He's inviting us to live an uncomplicated life where we won't have to make promises we can't keep. Simply saying yes or no, and then our words and our actions match. It's uncomplicated. Jesus continues in verse 38. He says, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You've heard that it was said, but I tell you. What Jesus says here would have been super shocking in their culture, because their culture was a culture of revenge and paybacks, might makes right, getting even. It's just how they were raised to fight for their rights and not let anyone take advantage of them, to even the score, make sure they were treated fairly, and that they get what they deserve. That was just back then, right? But what's Jesus inviting us into here? I learned this in engagement hour as well. We were talking about generosity, and someone pointed out to the class that we can be generous with forgiveness. I'd never thought of it that way. Jesus invites us to be generous with forgiveness. That's what verse 42 is talking about. It's talking about generosity. Give to the one who asks, and don't turn away someone who wants to borrow from you. What do you think that was? Talking about borrowing a cup of sugar? Also got that in my basket, but you didn't see that coming. He's not talking about loaning a cup of sugar to people. He's talking about being generous with our forgiveness. He's talking about generosity in light of being treated poorly. Generosity when someone takes from you or mistreats you. Give to them and don't turn them away. Don't hold back forgiveness. That's the next fill in the blank. Jesus is inviting us to be generous with forgiveness when we are treated poorly or when someone takes from you or mistreats you. You know, they slap me on the right cheek, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they were aiming somewhere else. I'm just going to offer them another chance, right? Offer the other cheek, chance after chance. 70 times 7. You've heard that before, right? You know, someone comes along and they demand my snowsuit. Fine, take the snowsuit, but here, take the hat and the gloves too. Take it all. I'm just going to be generous. I'm going to be generous with my forgiveness. Just take it. Jesus was saying in the Sermon on the Mount when his followers asked him how they should pray, he said, forgive our debts as we have also been as we also have forgiven our debtors, to forgive in a generous way, to forgive in the same way that you would like to be forgiven. You've heard that one before. You were raised with it. Jesus continues in verse 43. He says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Throughout his life, Jesus demonstrated an upside-down love. He loved the unlovable. He shared his life and time with the people that the culture, that the society would have called them enemies. Thieves, traitors, religious zealots, victims of adultery. That Jesus touched a leper, that he healed people on the Sabbath, that he spent time with Samaritans, that he allowed a sick woman to touch him. Jesus' person and his work were unacceptable to this culture. The stuff that he did was outrageous to this culture. But if he had only spent time with the Jews or the right political party, or if he would have only healed healthy people on weekdays, what good would that have done? I love verse 47, where Jesus says, what are you doing more than others? If I'm only spending time with my people that are easy to get along with, that look and act just like me, aren't even the horrible people like the tax collectors doing that? Aren't they, at a minimum, expressing love for people who show them love? Aren't even the pagans, the people who sacrifice their children in the fire, aren't they demonstrating a basic love for those who show them love in return? Jesus invites us to think about that. He says, what are you doing more than others? What is different about my love? What is different about the love that I express to the people around me? Jesus says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, Jesus isn't ordering us to be perfect here. He isn't imposing that on us. He's talking about perfection in context to love, reflecting the perfect love of God to people that are different than us, to pagans, people outside of the faith, tax collectors, people who rip us off, enemies, people who just take from you and never return anything. They never return the cup of sugar that they asked to borrow. You said borrow, dude. Bring it back. I mean, let's not talk about this, though, right? Let's put that back there. Because I'm going to bring it back. Right. People who just take from you and never return anything. People that are going to waste your time, waste your efforts, waste your love. You may have been taught to hate people that are different than you. You may have been taught in church to only love people who deserve it or who are on the same side as you. But the life, work, and teachings of Jesus invites us into something better. It invites us into the perfect love of God. The love of Jesus that said to a small, greedy, self-centered tax collector, a man who used people for his own financial gain, Jesus said to him, hey, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I want to be with you. That was different love. Jesus said to his close friend who betrayed him with a kiss, he called him friend. That's a different kind of love. And then he forgave the Roman soldiers that just beat him with whips. That's a different kind of love. That's what Jesus is inviting us into here. He's not imposing an extra internal or external effort on our part. You have to be perfect. Because earlier in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, unless your righteousness surpasses the righteousness of the Pharisees, you're out of luck anyway. So it's impossible to do what he's inviting us to here. It's impossible to love with a perfect love. But the thing is, Jesus is not inviting us to live up to him. He's inviting us to live from him. To live from the generosity and love and compassion and grace and forgiveness that he demonstrated for us, that he offers us, and that he will do through us. So let's close let's close out here with one more passage from the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 7, verse 13. Jesus says, enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now, you might be wondering, Dan, you've unpacked a lot of stuff here this morning. Are you going to pack it all back up? Yes, I am. But I'm going to use the smaller basket. Because the big basket won't fit through the small gate. And I'm only going to pick what's important. I'm going to pick the bandages. I'm going to pick the granola bars and the water. Because that's all I need. Because those are the things that I can offer to someone to reflect God's perfect love, to reflect the healing and the generosity to them. Now, I offered you all granola bars and you didn't take me up on my generosity. The offer's still open if you want it. I'm just saying. It's reflecting the generosity. Because some of the stuff I've been holding on to my whole life is outdated. It's immature. It's out of season. Sometimes it's even dangerous. Now you might be thinking about, I thought those verses were designed to keep sinners out of heaven. Like I was always taught those verses, were a way to keep sinners out of heaven. Like they're so weighted down and so loaded down with sins that they can't fit through the gate. And it's so easy to veer off the narrow path that you really have to be careful to stay on it. You have to be perfect. Well, maybe you've always heard that. But just like everything else in the Sermon on the Mount, maybe Jesus is inviting us into something different here. Like maybe instead of keeping people out, those verses are intended to keep me from bringing the wrong stuff in. Or maybe trusting the wrong things to get me in. Or maybe imposing the wrong things on others. Because some of the stuff, this basket, this won't fit through that narrow gate. So I have to be careful what I put back in my basket and just bring what fits through that gate. You might say, but I like my stuff. I do. I like my stuff. It's my stuff. That's why Jesus invited me to follow him before he ever talked about my stuff, because he knew I wouldn't let it go that easy. But he still invited me to follow him first. See, Jesus isn't taking anything away from us this morning. But once you're captivated by the person and the work of Jesus, you can trust his teachings, and maybe you won't need the extra stuff. So the last fill in the blank, sort of a question as you go this morning. Maybe write it down, maybe take a picture of it real quick. If we were to repack the smaller basket, what are some of the potentially outdated, underdeveloped, uninformed, or immature aspects of our faith that could be left out? Some of us have been sitting with this passage our whole lives. Remember, we're the target audience. We're the ones, when Jesus said, "You've heard it a long ago," we're the ones who've heard it. Some of us have heard this our whole lives. The Sermon on the Mount closes with people being amazed because Jesus taught with authority, not like the other teachers. There was something so appealing, so convincing about his person and his work that people were captivated by him, and they followed him, and they responded to his invitation into something better. Not to live up to him, but to live from him. Once I become captivated by the person and work of Jesus, maybe I won't need the extra stuff anymore. Amen?
So when I heard what Dan was going to be talking about this morning, a song flashed through my brain that I had done, count however old Peyton Scheckler is, and that many years ago, when Tori was on maternity leave last. And I just sang it for you guys, but today I wanted to kind of talk through why it flashed through my brain today, just as a perfect fit for this sermon, and then invite you to sing it with us. So if you know me at all, you know that lyrics, any song with good lyrics, I'm going to listen to it on repeat for like a year. And this was one of those songs. And that's because it just tells such a vivid story of God's invitation to us. The first verse starts with saying, "There's a grace when the heart is under fire, another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone." And this just illustrates how we can be at any point in our life and we can look back, and if we know the invitation that was extended to us, we know that we have never been alone through any struggle, through any time when we felt like the walls were closing in on us. And the coolest part of this song is each chorus progresses. So it starts with, "There was another in the fire, there is another in the fire, and there will be." God was with us. He is with us as we work through all of the complexities of this world and how to share Christ's love with people, and he always will be. The song ends by saying, "And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, because I know that's where you'll be." So if you feel like joining us, go ahead and join. If you feel like just listening, it's a very word-heavy song, so go ahead and read with us, but we're going to get started.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire, another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding how I've been set free? There is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my debt left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? to the things of this world. I know I will never be alone. There's another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever be reminded what power set me free? There is a grave that holds nobody. Now the power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between listen. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing's in between us. Nothing's in between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding, how good you've been to me? I count the joy in every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between listen. I can hear the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing's in between us. Nothing's in between us. Another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding, how good you've been to me, I count the joy in every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I count the joy in every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Thank you, praise team. Thank you, Dan. Remember, we have our engagement hour. Everybody is invited into that. If you have any questions about where to go, just come see me. I'll stay up here for a couple minutes. But just know that our 11 to 11:50 hour is for everybody. It's a time to get good teaching, but to also be able to interact as groups to continue the conversation. Let me close us in prayer. God, we ask you to do a work in our hearts. We ask that as we get to know you better, Jesus, that we would let go of our mallets and pick up our bandages. God, we ask that as we get to know you better, Jesus, that you would shrink our baskets down. We don't need all of the stuff that we're carrying, that we would be able to release our grips on some of the things that we've been carrying our whole lives and allow you to decide what goes in our baskets and what we can leave out. God, you invite us into a lightness. Your yoke is easy and your burden is light. And so I just pray that we would just capture that throughout this series and understand that the more that we hold on to your Son, Jesus, Lord, the more we are free to let go of anything else, the more that you can use any and everything to actually refine our faith and make us more like you. And I just pray that you would do that through our series, that you would grow our faith and help us to remember that our faith is sourced in you, that our faith, it's not about an amount but source. It's not about our ability to hold on to you. Sometimes we hold on, sometimes we let go, sometimes we forget, sometimes we take our eyes off you, but at the center is you, and you are holding on to us, and you never let go of us. Let us be reminded of that as we go today and through this week. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you for coming this morning.